Hi, good evening. We're having a little bit of a giggle here in the background, so please bear with us. We are actually just trying to work out how to share our screen. We just had a few technological issues. And I was just sitting here. I'm just loving watching where everyone's from. I feel extremely excited, and there's lots of people that we've had joining us for previous webinars. And I was just sitting here thinking about, you can plan and plan and plan, but at the end of the day, you just sometimes just have to let that plan go. And I'm going to try again, just to make sure that I am sharing this video, sharing our PowerPoint with you. So just bear with me 1 second. Sally, while I'm fiddling over here, could you do me a favor and can you tell me what your top 3 passions are and what you love the most?
Oh, yes, I'd love to. Hello, everybody. Good evening, first of all. And we were sitting there behind the screen doing the technical bits, but also just as soon as Nikki said, "Where are you from?" we get very excited because it makes it real and we feel like we're connecting with real people. So thank you so much for joining us and telling us where you are. So 3 passions of mine. 1 would have to be my children. I'm not just saying that because they're probably in the background somewhere, not asleep. But my children give me the greatest joy and the greatest learnings and self-development. And 2, I'm looking at my dog adorably asleep on the couch. Animals, I love animals. I have a special space in my heart for whales and all animals. And nature, love all of nature. And I love learning. I love learning more about myself and helping other people to just reach a little bit more freedom. Freedom is my word of the moment. Under many guises, it's been coming up in the last 2 weeks. Just that sense of how do we get a sense of more freedom in our lives? And that can mean many, many things. But those are my passions. And yay, we can see the screen share. We have feedback. Thanks, Julie.
Amazing. Fantastic. Thank you. I think we did really good.
Beautiful.
Oh, we did it.
Yay, we did it. Of course we did it.
Amazing. How good are we? That's beautiful. So we might kick off. First and foremost, thank you so much, Julie, for letting us know that you could see it. Trying a new platform this evening. We've had some amazing feedback from all of you, and we wanted to, as any of you that have joined us on previous webinars, we're really looking to find how we can create a community and how we can begin to interact with you. So we're all coming to this with our own thoughts and our own questions and our own inquiries. And one thing that I know that we, thank you, Jenny, we're a little bit excited. We're kind of doing a woohoo too. One of the things that we, hope to do, and one of the things that we are committed to doing, is getting all children through this time and really supporting them with the tools and the skills that they need to not only be able to get through this time, but to thrive through this period. And it's not only about our children, it's also about us. So a really brief moment, I think it'd be really great just to stop. I don't know about you, but just in getting the screen sorted and then having a very, very big, literally laughing cry with Miss Sally before we started. Laughing cry because I was laughing so much. I think we might just take a moment, because most of us have run in from the busyness of our lives. And one of the things is it's really hard to stop and actually be present. I'm just going to invite you just for a moment to place one hand on your heart and one hand on your belly. And just consciously breathing. And just welcoming the inhalation. Welcoming the exhalation. And I invite you just to notice what's happening right now. What's pulling at your attention? It might be a thought from the past. It might be the way that the breath touches your hand on your belly or your chest. Just begin to notice the sensations in your body without trying to fix them or change them or judge them. It's really allowing yourself to come here, come home. And just making your exhalation a little bit longer than your inhalation. It's really down-regulating your nervous system. Letting your teeth part slightly. Letting your tongue relax. Your shoulders drop. Letting your abdomen completely deflate each time you exhale. And completely inflate as you inhale. If you choose to, just resting your hands down. And just becoming aware of the sounds around you. And just taking a couple of breaths. And I want you just to reflect for a moment. So we're just using an acronym. And this acronym is one of the acronyms from Dr. Dan Siegel, and it's called SIFT. So some of you that saw the webinar that I ran with him or some of the work that we were doing, it's a brilliant acronym. Often when I say to people, how are you? Or what are you noticing right now? They'll often say, I'm stressed, or I'm in a rush, or I'm really, really busy. Just taking a moment to notice what sensations you can feel without judgment, noticing any images, maybe in your mind, welcoming any feelings that you have, and getting really curious around the thoughts that are in your mind. What thoughts are there? And I'd love to hear from some of you how that was. What was it like just to stop for a moment? Just to really, really stop before we move through into this webinar. So I'm just going to walk you through just a little bit about who we are. So we're extremely excited to be here tonight to not only be supporting you as parents or as educators or as carers of beautiful young people, but also of the people that are taking care of and supporting our future group of leaders. Life Skills Group has been around for over 12 years, and we've been in a really privileged position to work with hundreds and hundreds of schools and hundreds of thousands of students and teachers. All of the work that we do has been derived, A, from evidence base, but really being able to look at from the incredible, exceptional specialist teachers that we train to go into the schools, to be able to have the tools to be able to address the current needs of our students. So initially the company started working in a non-competitive sports environment, teaching mindfulness, teaching positive psychology, and teaching movement skills that weren't about winning, but were about getting to know, develop self-awareness, self-management, and being able to build well-being through focused attention and mindfulness. So we do this through 3 pillars. We have programs and specialist teachers that go into schools and deliver a 6, 8, or 10-week program in schools. In New South Wales, it's actually 8 hours NESA accredited. So not only are we helping to deliver these skills for the students, we're also helping to deliver them and to develop the skills of our teachers to be able to embed a common language and really support them as they work with their young people through the year. The teachers, we have a NESA accredited programs that are really focused on our teachers being not only humans, but also understanding the science of wellbeing, their own wellbeing, and the tools that we can impart so that you can take care of yourself. We then go into how we look at embedding and bringing social emotional learning into the workplace. And we have a remote platform that Life Skills Go is our online interactive platform that delivers social emotional learning. That platform is amazing in regards to being able to track students, to be able to really understand how they are. So this was one of our incredible work, that we were able to take 12 years of work and look at how do we share this, but as teachers or as parents, how do we really begin to teach emotional intelligence, self-regulation, mindfulness, and really understand and be able to have longitudinal reporting on how our students are. No matter what we do, whether it's for parents or whether it's for schools, the way that we roll it out is to make sure that we fully embed into a school. We have assigned wellbeing officers or advisors that actually work with the schools to make sure that we're supporting the classroom, the school, and the families through our programs. And there's lots of feedback loops through there. Just as we come back to about to embark into the work that we're doing this evening, having a look at moving from anxiety to calm, all of the work that we do at Life Skills Group is not only built out to the ACARA model, the CASEL model, but also the OECD. It's all evidence-based, science-backed, and it's all aligned to curriculum and reporting. One of the things that we really believe in is not siloing approaches. So you'll often hear me present, or I'll be working, or you'll hear Sally working. It's not just about mindfulness. It's not just about growth mindset, critical thinking, or neuroscience, or positive psychology. It's about bringing all of those into a methodology so that we can begin to work with the people in front of us and begin to build the future generation, our future leaders. So again, I just wanted to briefly touch on this problem. And I think more and more, and I seem to have lost Miss Sally. We did really well on the technology, and now we've lost Miss Sally. Just bear with me 1 second. I'll just find out where she's gone. Poor Miss Sally. Oh. Bear with me 1 second. I seem to have lost her. Let's see, we'll invite her. Do you want to invite her on screen? There we go. Hopefully she's listening. She's going, find me, Miss Nikki, find me. Miss Sally, if you can hear me, I have invited you again. Oh, there you are. I really missed you.
I was here sitting quietly, so I didn't miss a thing. Please continue. I'm back.
Oh, okay. I'm actually blushing. I've just got to, I'm really probably sharing a little bit too much of myself this evening. This is my latest little thing when I feel a bit ashamed, or I feel a little bit embarrassed, or a little bit anxious. It's a new thing that I've developed in the last probably year, that I actually blush, but we won't go there. So I think all of us online this evening, you know, we're very aware of the problems that we're facing and that our youth of today are facing. And I think particularly we were in a meeting earlier today with San Francisco. We were talking about how, for those of us that are passionate enough at 8 o'clock on a Wednesday night to be online, we know that these skills need to be taught. They're not things that inherently we're going to get without explicitly teaching them, practicing. In the same way that we go to the gym to build a muscle, we need to work these muscles. And these muscles that science has now shown that we can prove. Yet one of the things that's been really interesting is that it has become, first and foremost, one of the things that we need to address. I was speaking to a school that's been running our programs in their school for a very, very long time. And I was saying to them, after the first lockdown, when you transition the students back, what did you prioritize? And they said, we prioritize running a Life Skills Go class every single day. Because if we don't address the needs of our students and the transition of the disruption in their life, we're going to have really big learning problems. So the scientific foundation, and again, I won't go into this too deeply, but one of the reasons I popped this slide here, and I'm sure Sally will be, she's not sitting there giggling and wiggling her fingers around. I think the beautiful part that we've got at the moment is that science has taught us that this can be taught. If it's explicitly taught, these skills and tools can really support not only our students, but also ourselves. I thought before we dive into, and Miss Sally, you might have a little giggle at me here, but I thought before we dive into, you know, what is anxiety and what can we do and how do we move to calm, often as educators or as mothers or as fathers, I've popped this, you know, we have the opportunity to react or respond, and it's our choice. And I think it's an interesting one, because we often forget that we do have choice in these moments. And particularly if we're working with a highly anxious child, and I know for myself, working with my son, it was really, really challenging because we're doing it day in, day out. If we're teaching students that are showing, as I like to refer to, very colourful behaviour, First and foremost, we need to start with us. And I just wanted to see, what did you want us to speak to that one, Sally, in regards to child management or being able to help them build self-awareness and why it needs to start with us?
I think, yeah, I love that you've put this in at the beginning, because this is where it starts. We can't tell somebody to do something that we're not doing ourselves. And when it comes to emotions and emotional intelligence, we all know here that our children watch us way more than they listen to the words that we say, and they're constantly watching us. And co-regulation happens all the time. It's happened from when we were first born. You know, as babies, we co-regulate. We suck our thumb to gain some comfort, and you know, infants turn their heads away from something they don't like. So regulation, emotional regulation, is something we always do, but we're not necessarily always conscious of it, and therefore we don't necessarily always make good choices when we do it. So I think it's really important to recognize that we can all, and we all do, self-regulate. So when we talk about emotional regulations, it's not a big scary thing that we don't know how to do. We all know how to do it. It's just bringing conscious awareness in front of it, and then that gives us the power to react, or to respond instead of just reacting, which is really what learning all about our emotions is about, isn't it?
I think that's a really good point. And you know, and again, this is interactive. So for those of you that are here tonight, please pop questions up, because we are here for you. We might not be able to get to all of them, but we're really interested in how, you know, what brought you here tonight, what questions you came with. Miss Sally's disappearing. I was so scared you were leaving me again. I was going to miss you again, Miss Sally. One of the things around this is, you know, I can speak from being a mother here. And I think I've touched on this before, and also being an educator and working with large groups of students. It's really easy to say, okay, you need to pause, you need to slow down, you need to stop, and you need to not react. And yet here we are, and we move so fast, and we have pressing needs. We have to respond to 28 other students in our class. We have to do, you know, we've got a million things happening. And let's also speak to the disruption of everyone's life right now. One of the things that I have found has been really, really necessary is naming it to tame it. Like really acknowledging that, again, you were mentioning that emotional intelligence, noticing when I am agitated and not projecting it on the child in front of me, not projecting it on my family in front of me, and beginning to recognize it and bring some awareness and some attention to it. Also being able to let go of the shame and bring compassion and gentleness. And I think one of those things I talked about in the last webinar, I talked about forgiveness, but at the moment I feel like it's asking us to be very, very patient, very, very gentle, very forgiving, and very self-compassionate, because lives have been disrupted. There's a lot of you here from Melbourne that are teaching remotely. We have a lot of other people in other countries that are in lockdown at the moment. If we are being watched and we are wanting to mentor and mirror and we are wanting to model behaviour that we want to see, there's also room for humanness in there. And that part of how we can begin to model that too is, how are we speaking to ourselves? And how are we judging ourselves? And in turn, how are we also self-regulating ourselves? Did you want to pop anything in there, Miss Sally, or did I touch anything that you wanted to say?
I think it's so important, isn't it, at the moment? There's so much going on, and yeah, we were behind the scenes, weren't we? And we said, gosh, there's a lot of people from Melbourne here, and we're not surprised, and we're really glad, because, you know, this is about anxiety, today's topic, isn't it? And we are already aware that the levels of anxiety in our society, and getting worse in our kids and the next generation coming through, is not acceptable in my book, and I know in your book too. And it's getting increasingly more of a problem, and it has so many repercussions. We already knew that before COVID. Then 2020 has been just a big year, hasn't it, for us? There's no denying that we are living in a world where anxiety is kind of, if you're not feeling any degree of anxiety or concern or worries, I think that would be more of an issue than if you are now. So we're living in a world where, it's sort of, why wouldn't we be worried and why wouldn't we be anxious? So there's so much going on that I just think it's important now more than ever to learn how to manage with those emotions. So it's not now, how do we get rid of it? It wasn't ever how do we get rid of it, but it's how do we manage our lives with everything that's going on, which naturally would bring a level of anxiety. And when you say the self-awareness comes first, self-awareness has to come first, because if we don't know what it is that we're feeling, we can't get to any of the next steps, which are inevitably about dealing with the feeling. It all starts with how do we feel? How do we get used to knowing how we feel? And as you said earlier, it has to begin with ourselves. If we have a child, it's a big year for all of us. For children, imagine if you're 3 and you're 4 and you're looking at the world, and if you've been looking at TV or
and Miss Sally's frozen, so I'm just going to move us through to the next part. I think it's really, here we are, and we're looking at moving from anxiety to calm. And I think Sally did a beautiful job explaining anxiety last time, and we had a lot of people request that we actually revisit this again. One of the standouts for me when we begin to look at this is not all anxiety is bad. And one of the things that can begin to happen, a little bit like a pain loop, is that what we notice is people become nervous of becoming anxious again and again. And in terms of not fearing anxiety, but recognizing rather that, oh, wow, look at that, I'm anxious. What do I need to do? And yes, I know in a moment it's very hard to say, oh, I'm anxious, but beginning to recognize what the signs are. What does anxiety look like? Not only for ourselves, but also for our children. And I know for myself, like I often don't share this very much, but I had a severe, I don't know if I've actually shared this with you, Miss Sally. I think this is probably, probably something I haven't shared with you before. Growing up, I had a very, very serious anxiety disorder. And it got to the point where I was so anxious that if my breathing changed or if something happened, I'd be so fearful that I was going to have an anxiety attack. I wasn't actually having an anxiety attack. I was just nervous of the anxiety coming. And I was just mentioning, Sally, that a little bit like a pain loop. How do we begin to interject that point so that we can begin to recognize and begin to teach our beautiful young people about our emotions, that they're a direction, they're information, but they're not fact. I'd love for you to sum up how what is anxiety, just very, very briefly from a psychological point of view.
Well, the psych model definition is persistent, excessive, and unrealistic worry about everyday things, which is why we're sort of in a curious place now. I think because those things which may have seemed excessive are now every day a little bit. I think the important thing when talking about our children is that anxiety shows up in different ways. So a child isn't going to come like you and I would and if I say, how are you? You may say, I'm feeling really anxious. My heart's beating fast and I keep getting, flushes and I'm feeling these emotions waver. A child isn't going to verbalize anxiety. What tends to happen is it comes out in behavior or it comes out often in gastro ways. It comes out in lots and lots of ways, but they're the two big ones. So behavior can be anything from, acting out, but also a generalized way is kind of acting younger or older than the age. So a sudden regression or development, appearance of a development, or gastro issues. I've got a tummy ache, I feel sick, headaches, not sleeping, all of these things. So as parents and caregivers and teachers at the moment, I think our job here is looking under the hood for the anxiety, because it's not going to come as a verbal expression of anxiety.
I think that's an important point to acknowledge. And I think, could you just give us, and I know that your love is neuroscience, can you just give us a very, very simplistic, because I think, we know where we are. We've all been here for a long time now. I think we're beginning to identify those, a little bit, we've seen the kind of the overt signs of anxiety in our students or our children, those nuances that we'll have a little look at. But if you can just explain just, a neurological level or brain level, what's actually happening when we're anxious.
So if we think about survival and evolution, our brain is there to keep us safe. So when something threatens us physically or emotionally, our brain does something and it goes into the stress response. And the sympathetic nervous system switches on and prepares us for fight, flight, or freeze response, which I think we're all familiar with. And what happens is the limbic system, where the amygdala lives, and we're all, I think, probably familiar with talking about the amygdala when we talk about anger and extreme emotions, fires and is activated. But what happens importantly is when the stress response is switched on, when the sympathetic nervous system is firing and active, we produce chemicals, hormones such as cortisone, and we produce chemicals, and chemicals rush through our body and prepare us for the fight and flight response. But importantly, when this is happening, it takes away blood from the newest part of our brain, the prefrontal cortex, the frontal lobe. It takes blood away from there. And this is designed for higher executive functions such as thinking and regulation, emotional regulation and intuition, all the things that are higher cognitive things. So when we're in fight or flight, it's not a time to learn and it's not a time to think. I think that's the fundamental thing. So when we're in fight or flight and the limbic system is firing and firing, the first thing we need to do is get out of it, because learning how to get out of it is the first stage of taking control again of ourselves, our emotions and our bodies and brains. So all of the things that we teaches us how to switch off the stress response and come back into the thing that makes us human, this part of our brain.
And just while we're here, and we will do more practical things. So I have a beautiful young child in front of me who's extremely anxious. What is one really simple thing I can do with this beautiful young person in front of me? That's a horrible question, Miss Nikki, because that's a big question, but there's lots of simple strategies that we can do. But what would be your...
Because, we live in this world, and so it's good to go step by step. But the first thing, which is really obvious, but is important to verbalize and for us to remember, is connection. So we have to connect. And when we connect, what we're doing is creating a safe environment for the child. Imagine, we're scared for our life, and physiologically, that's what's happening. We need to feel safe in order to start the calm down response and to be able to share what's going on. So we're not going to share if we're not feeling safe, and we can't switch off the stress response if we're not feeling safe. So the first thing is to really connect. We all do this, I think, here, to get down and really connect, and then to affirm what they're saying. Especially as parents and caregivers, we often want to make things better quickly, and our busy lives sort of enhance that. So if somebody comes rushing up to us and, crying and screaming and saying so-and-so's just done this, we often rush to sort out the problem. Whereas actually we need to connect and listen and understand and empathize with what they're saying before we can sort of start the intervention.
Thank you. And I think you've just done a beautiful segue into our next stage, which is, I think we just need to kind of have a look at, we talked about the overt signs, but particularly there's such a complexity in the way that our young people show anxiety, or they show fear, or they show emotions. And I'm often saying to educators, you know, if a child is being extremely colourful with their behaviour, it's our job, I love what you said, to get under the hood and really explore what's really going on. And to also watch our own intolerance of, like you said, either wanting to clean it up or move on, but really creating that space. So there was an interesting thing from James who said, you know, I understand we agree where we all are, but where to from now? And I think a lot of it comes from us. What are we going to do differently? How are we going to slow down? You talk about connection. It's really hard to connect when we're not grounded. It's really hard to connect when we're wanting to move the pace and we're wanting to move things through. So I think, you know, is there any, I love this slide, but are there any really kind of tiny little signs that you've noticed in practice that really stand out for you, that you would say, hey, if you're seeing this in your students or your children, just keep an eye on them and begin to work with them a little bit more?
Well, the best thing to say is change. You know, as parents and as teachers, we know how our children are, and instead of just thinking, as we may sometimes do, it's the age or the you know, leap of development, or let's, you know, just tune into the fact that it may be anxiety, because we're seeing a hell of it, a hell of a lot of it. So it's a change, you know. The biggest ones are usually sleeping and then the behavioral issues. So I have 2 children and their anxiety shows up in very different ways. My son, it's behavioral, and he'll just hype up. He won't listen, and he won't respond to things we ask. He just hypes up. My daughter, on the other hand, it's always stomach issues. I just feel sick. I don't feel well, Mum. Completely different responses, but because I know them so well, I know that that's their manifestation of anxiety. So I think it's you know, having that extra allowance for them, perhaps at this time, that it could be anxiety, and then looking for changes, and then just how are they normally, which is hard in a classroom of 30. But it's really looking out for those changes, because it could be anything.
Yeah, I think that's I remember when I was doing a research program with 10 really colourful, beautiful young people, and I remember one of them was displaying needing absolute order, and needing to know exactly what was going to happen after recess, and then what was going to happen after lunch, and can you write it out, and can we have a plan? And the more I was uncovering it, this was his control of wanting to control his environment. And he was all of 7, you know, at the time, but he developed what looked like an over-vigilance, and was actually looked very, very organised, but way, like, as you mentioned before, way too developed for a 7-year-old child. And it really stood out as a big warning sign for me. I think that's a really interesting comment, Tracy. Thank you. I sometimes find it difficult to empower children to manage their own emotions rather than trying to fix things for them. I think we're all in that boat, and thank you for bringing that up, because it is one of those things that we do want to jump in, and particularly if we're a parent or we're an educator, and we absolutely love, you know, we love our children. It usually comes from a place of absolute love and not wanting to see them suffering. And I think when we truly understand emotional intelligence, or where emotions are coming from, the emotions aren't going to hurt our children. It's the way that they, you know, display them, or the behaviours, or the things that they're missing out on. And one thing that, Sally, I'm sure that you agree with this, because we talk about it all the time, you know, where to from now? I love that comment from James, because if we don't address these needs, learning doesn't happen. If children are in heightened emotions, if they're in fear, if they're not able to manage, they're not able to learn, they're not able to take in an environment, they're missing out on not only, as we know, a huge amount of their social development, but they're also missing out on their emotional regulations and growing with the time, with what's happening in front of them at the moment. I thought this was really, really wonderful, and thank you for popping this in, Sally. I think, you know, how does anxiety affect the body? As adults, we, you know, I'll often say to educators when we're running, you know, professional developments, how does it affect you? And it'll be like my head's racing, my thoughts are racing, my mouth's dry. But I think for children, sometimes it can be really, really different. And as you mentioned, you know, my daughter too, if there was a big test coming up, it would be, I have a stomach ache. really being able to not only know, but also watch for changes in behaviour. So again, it leads us back into where we first started around self-awareness. So I thought maybe what we might do is just some practical work here and really have a look at, if we're asking our children or our students to develop self-awareness, where are we at with that? And I thought first and foremost, it's really understanding, our emotions, that they are data, not directions. I popped this in here because it really helped me, initially to really have a look at emotions and thoughts are not fact. Did you want to speak to that, Sally?
Yeah, I love this too. Last week, you were mentioning somebody that you had been working with that week, who had said to you, what I need to learn about managing my emotions is how to get rid of them. And that would be easy. And I think this paradigm shift that we could do from going to emotions getting away to emotions are giving us information all the time. It's really powerful, because that's exactly what they are. They're giving us information, and if we can we train ourselves to think that they're helping us, they're pointing towards things that we could tweak in order for us to be healthier ultimately. I think that's a healthy way to look at them. And Tracy, I think this comes to your point as well, that absolutely, this is why, Nikki and I are so passionate about the work that we do, because for me, this is the ultimate empowerment for our kids. How many times do we hear our kids say, I couldn't help it? And to be able to teach them that they always have a choice, that, there's thoughts and emotions and behaviors, and, we always have a choice. It's that, as Nikki started with the slide about respond, not react, we always actually do have a choice. Sometimes it feels like we don't, but we do. And teaching them that, Tracy, teaching them
is such a vital piece that we can actually offer our young people. I think also one of the things in being able to help our young people and ourselves recognize is our thoughts aren't fact. This quote from Teagle, Siegel, Williams, Ridgway, and Salzway and Lau, by distancing ourselves from our thoughts and disengaging from the associated emotions, stress and anxiety are reduced. So often we get caught believing our thoughts and thinking that they're real. One of the practices that we encourage not only our students, but also we practice ourselves, is really being able to watch our thoughts come up and not attach to them. So being able to recognize, oh, I'm having that thought right now, and I can let it go. Not allowing ourselves to fall into it and get caught up in that feedback loop of it. Vicky, I just want to respond to you and thank you so much for taking the time to put that up. It takes your daughter a really long time to go to sleep. We are going to move now in this next section over to what are some things that we can practically begin to take away, and how can we shift? So understanding where anxiety comes from, understanding that it is in our reflexes of survival and responding, but also being able to have some practical things that you can pop in a toolkit to be able to take away with you. And that will be our hope this evening, that there's things that you can begin to practice, and particularly if you are finding it that your child is finding it very, very hard to sleep. I thought that would go through, how can I work with my child, or how can I begin to support my students at the moment? And Sally, I think that observe, listen and accept. I think the acceptance part is really, really difficult at times, and it's been touched on by quite a few participants this evening, that it's very difficult for us to see our students or our children when they're in discomfort. What kind of languaging would we use? How would we speak to either our students or our children when they are in the midst of a large emotion and we're beginning to connect with them? What are some things that we can practically begin to do so that we don't exacerbate the situation, but we also create a container of safety for them?
So reflecting back what you've heard is a brilliant way to validate what they're saying, and it enables them to be seen and heard, which provides that container of safety that we spoke about earlier. So using their words initially, and if they haven't got the words for the emotion, we spoke a lot about the importance of building up a great emotional vocabulary from a very young age. You know, it's a great tool to be able to manage our emotions. We've got to have the vocab to do it. So depending on the age, if they don't have the words yet, and you know what they're describing, then name it for them. We know, Nikki mentioned name and tame earlier, we know that by naming an emotion, it helps to calm down the stress response and turn on the parasympathetic stress response just by labeling it. So if you can label it, if they're saying something, reflect back. If not, bring the emotion on the table. And the accept bit is really, as you alluded to, Nikki, it's sometimes we're busy and we want them to be okay, and that drives us to kind of ignore the signs that they're giving us that they are anxious or are stressed or need our extra attention and help. So accepting it is a big thing. And I just think, you know, the quicker that we accept there's a problem, the quicker that we can help them. So it's going to go on, you know, it's like adults, the longer we leave something, it's just going to get worse ultimately. So accepting, here we are, let me help you. Yeah, so naming it.
And notice what I've got here is face. So facing it. Do you want to speak to that one?
Yeah, so and then facing it head on. And I think one important thing to put in here, Nikki, that we touched on last week as well, is that it's okay. So we have a tendency as well to want our children to not experience negative emotions. And every emotion is okay. And it's really important that we teach them that for a young age too. I hear a lot of children, when you get under the bonnet, under the hood, the reason that they haven't expressed how they feel earlier is because, well, I didn't want to disappoint mummy, or I know that daddy likes it when I'm happy, or, you know, I know that it's easier if, you know. So there's a generalized fear over being allowed to be seen when we have below positive emotions, and we need to change that, especially now when anxiety is becoming more the norm. We need to say it's okay to feel this. A lot of people are feeling this. You know, I'm feeling this sometimes too. Your dad's feeling this sometimes too. Most of, you know, you could even ask if it's a classroom, who else has experienced this? And make it a conversation, normalize it so that you can face it together. Nikki, I'm going to have to run and get a charger. I'm so sorry.
You actually that's actually beautiful. I actually just thought of this. I'd love to share a beautiful poem by Rumi, just in talking about that observing, listening, facing, and perspective. If any of you know Rumi, one of his very famous poems actually is called The Guest House. And to me, it really is the depth of emotional intelligence and the welcoming of all emotions. So I might actually read that to you. Let's pull this up. The guest house. This being human is a guest house. Each morning a new arrival, a joy, a depression, a meanness, some momentary awareness comes as an unexpected visitor. Welcome and entertain them all, even if they're a crowd of sorrows who violently sweep your house empty of its furniture. Still treat each guest honourably. He may be clearing you out for some new delight. The dark thought, the shame, the malice. Meet them at the door laughing and invite them in. Be grateful for whoever comes, because each has been sent as a guide from beyond. I love that poem in terms of being able to welcome our human experience. And I love what you were just saying about looking under the hood. You know, first and foremost is the identifying the emotions, being able to build that self-awareness that we're speaking about. but also being able to build that emotional literacy, being able to name that, and as a family or as a classroom, really being able to embed that into our daily language and not being terrified. So again, if we go back to the emotions and thoughts, they're not fact, they're data, they're information, they feed us through. And shifting into that, perspective as well, being able to recognize that I might feel anxious now, asking my child or my student in front of me where they're noticing it. I love using the sift analogy, particularly in large emotions, being able to recognize sensations, images, thoughts, or feelings, and being able to get them to come and really be with it. We know that the emotions will then also organically move through the body, and we'll begin to build that trust equity that it's not going to last forever. What would you say around, particularly if I'm trying to teach my students or my children perspective, what would sort of be your top tips there?
Well, I think practical skills now that, the child's been seen, they've connected, they're feeling safe, and we've validated what's going on for them. Then what we want to do is get into the education about why we don't want to stay in that emotion, say anxiety. We've touched on this again last week, but age appropriate. So if it's a young child, you might just explain that, when you're in that state, then the brain has a hard time being able to be creative. So it's going to impact how much fun you're able to have and how much fun, you love doing X game, and you're not going to be able to do that as much and have much fun out of it. So just the education piece, age appropriately, about why we need to move out of this state now, and then go to techniques of how to do it. And the perspective is we really want to teach our kids as well problem-solving skills themselves, as opposed to solving it for them, which we do as people that love other people, when we're not being mindful or when we're being super busy. We just want to solve it so that we can get on with what we're doing sometimes. And so this is really to do with the problem solving. And I can give you a real life example. I had a dad come to me and say, this was a few weeks into the pandemic, and the schools had been closed for probably 6 weeks. And he said he had 3 children, the youngest of which was 5. And they'd suddenly come out with, when they were at school, they had got the information that what this meant in the world was that all the adults are going to die. So this is a huge issue. We just misinformation or catastrophizing or wherever they'd got the information from isn't important. The important thing is that this is what had gone into their little heads. And so then how can we help? Then when we know what the issue is, which is brilliant, and we're only going to get to that once we've validated enough that they tell us what's actually going on in terms of the anxiety. What is it that you're worried about? So then I can help you. And now let's problem solve. So if it was that instance, then we could actually get real facts about how many people have died compared to how many people have contracted the illness. And it's just a problem solving, like put things into perspective.
Yeah, I think that's a really, really fantastic idea. The teach skills moment is a really, really big one. Like we get asked constantly around what's best practice, what should we be doing? And, I've been really, one of the things that I think is the most important that stands out for me, and there's a lot of this, but consistency. And I often liken, the work that we're doing on our brain, and the work that we're doing on our mind, to the work that we're doing on our body. If we don't exercise, if we don't eat well, we're not going to have good physical well-being. If we don't take care of our thoughts, if we're not practicing some form of mindfulness or focused attention and really checking in with how we are, we're not going to be able to build that muscle. So a regular practice in a school, whether that's coming in, we have through the Life Skills Go platform, coming in, doing the weather reports straight off the bat in the morning, checking in with how every student is, not only allowing the teachers to be able to visibly see and address how the students are, but also having a proactive response, a mindfulness or focused attention response to it. Also, as Vicky was saying, not only just once a day, if you've got time, when we come back in from recess, when we come back in from lunch, they don't have to be large. Dr. Amishi Jha talks about 8 minutes across a day. And I think that's, it's beautiful. 8 minutes across a day. If I can check in, I'm going to be creating much stronger muscles in my mind. I'm going to be changing patterns. I'm going to be changing habits. That ability to be able to bring it through then and then translate that back into our home. Now, I'm a mother myself. We often have the best intentions and then lots of other things happen. But also looking at how are we beginning to wind down as a family? Particularly at the moment when we are on hyper alert, there are a lot of changes. We might not be at school. There might not be that. How are we as a family going to prepare for bed? And what are those habits that we can begin to instill to not only teach the skills, but also model what we're doing? What would you say to that, Sally?
Yeah, absolutely. With the teaching skills part, absolutely. And the important thing as well is teaching it when we don't need it. So we're not in a learning state when we're enraged or, full of anger. It's not the time to teach the skill then. It's getting the practice in fun times when the mind is open and ready to learn, so that when we need it, we can pull on it. And the modeling, I read an article just this week that said that the family unit is more important. Of course, it's always important, but they were comparing kind of catastrophic times, and they were looking at, big impacts, say the 9/11 towers, instances that affect a huge number of people, and such as the pandemic. And they were saying that things that go on over time, it's more important to have that family support and unit, as it is when there's, a crisis, say a shooting in a high school, or an earthquake or something that affects a lot of people, and is a tragedy that has a shorter time frame into the tragedy. So they were equating this pandemic with, this is the time to build up that family unit. That's the most support that you can give our children. And whatever the family unit looks like in today, it's having those people that support our children work as a team and be more attentive than ever. It's so important right now. And modeling, as as we touched on earlier, emotional intelligence, emotional regulation, all of the stuff that we teach has to start with ourselves first, because we're no help helping a child to calm down if we've got rage running through ourselves. So we have to be able to check in with ourselves before we help them. And also, huge at the moment is how we are reacting to these times, and being really ultra careful. Just in the same way that we probably all are about the amount of media that's on in the house that children can access, is just as important as the conversations that go on in our house, and how we are reacting. If we're freaking out, they're seeing that that's what happens. They're learning. If we are managing ourselves, they are looking to us, and it's a teaching moment. We're able to use this opportunity.
Absolutely. And I think that one of the things too that I've, that's been really highlighted recently for me is, particularly in fear or, right now in security. So our world has been changed dramatically, quite drastically. And leaning into that black and white thinking can be so anxiety provoking. One of the things that I've been really trying to the best of my human ability, being able to watch, has been, what am I saying? How am I saying it? And the way that I'm reacting to what I'm saying in front of my children, and not just in front of my children, but for me, and being able to manage that I'm not going into black or white. Also coming into that acceptance of, I might have mentioned this before and I apologize for that, but we are here now. And if I spend all my time beginning to try and push it away, and when this is over, and when, beginning to fight that situation, I'm no longer actually in the presence of life. And right now, this has gone on for a long time, and we are here. How do we begin to find, joy, happiness, which comes from internally, not externally? How do we begin to shift our perspective? and begin to find those small things in our day that we can do as a family. And one of those things, to your point, Vicky, is also, if we are bookending the day, we might at the table sit down and talk about how we are. We might talk about how we're feeling. We might begin to put a language or begin to go into storytelling or being able to even begin to name emotions. But on top of that, maybe beginning to do a family relaxation or being able to do a body scan before we go to sleep. The same thing at breakfast, we might have a check-in. The beautiful thing that I find works really, really nicely is often our young people have a very small repertoire of emotions. So it's, how are you? I'm bored. How are you? I'm happy. How are you? I'm sad. Being able to expand that out is a beautiful gift that we can offer them too. Tell me more about that. Where do you feel that in your body? What situations evoke that? In that too, we're not only building the emotional literacy with them, but we're also getting to know them and really, as we mentioned before, our emotions also can help us understand what we care about, what we value, what's important to us. And when we place importance on that with our own children, be that our students or our family, we're offering them the greatest gift that, we weren't taught these things at school. I've spent 23 years studying and working really hard, underpinning by that question that we're often asked, I really want to get to know myself, or I want to know what I really care about. We now know that we have this opportunity to teach this to our families. And we also are often with our families a lot more now because we're not running around. So being able to switch our own perspective on how am I going to begin to bring this into my home? What do I want this to look like? In the same way that I don't want to be going to the gym once a month, can I begin to embed this once a day, maybe twice a day? Maybe I begin to, and what I'll do as a follow-up from this webinar tonight is I will send you some recordings of some of the relaxations, some of the guided relaxations. I think last time I sent you out the body scan, but also some really fun cards that we have. So we have a whole series of physical activities, mindfulness, non-competitive sports, a huge amount of products that we have on the Go platform that you can begin to, as a family, not only embed and have fun, but play with them. But also there's inquiring questions that we use with our students and also with our children that you can begin to build that language out, not only at home, but also in the classroom. I'm really aware of the time, and I don't want to go into resentment time because I think we've done really, really well being here on a Wednesday night at 8 o'clock till 9 o'clock. But we will send you out some resources to be able to not only bookend, but to begin to bring not only that self-awareness, but self-management tools into your home or into your school. There is the opportunity to also be able to have free trials of the Life Skills Go platform for the schools. Just bear with me 1 second. There's a great question. I'm going through something that made you smile today. Oh, I love that. We have a question related to gratitude, our golden thread, or something that made you smile today. 3 and 6-year-olds love it. I've also covered my kitchen walls with different emotions and the vocab of emotions each day. My kids are thankful, sleeping a lot better than the start of lockdown. Amazing. Completely agree. There's also, as you've seen behind me, there's a huge amount of posters that you can also download off the Go platform and have them around so that you're beginning to reinforce that language. And again, just thinking of it like a muscle. I wouldn't eat once a week. We need to do these things, and we need to value our mental health as much as we value our physical health. I just want to say a huge big thank you to all of you. We will send out a survey because we ran this session again because we actually forgot to press record last time, but we won't talk about that. And we had hundreds and hundreds of people asking us to redo this session. So I just want to say a huge big thank you. We'd also like to know what you'd like next. And thank you for acknowledging that we worked through some tech pains. That was really sweet of you. We're a bit proud of ourselves. We're going to high five ourselves when we're finished. But we would really love to hear what we can do to support you. We're all facing different things, but we also have the most valuable, incredible people in front of us. First and foremost, ourselves. So thank you for making the time for you to be here, but also our future generation of leaders. So to really impact, share, support them. And as I was saying, how do we get all of our children through this time, and not just through this time, but how do we get them to flourish on the other side of that? And as you've mentioned so beautifully and so eloquently all evening, Miss Sally, you know, this is an opportunity for change, and it's an opportunity for this to not be peace, love, and mung beans. This is something that we can really have, that we now know that we can embed and put into our lives, our schools, and also really make sure that we're, you know, leaning on evidence-based, science-based practices that we can, as subject matter specialists, begin to share with you. On behalf of us at Life Skills Group, I want to say thank you to all of you for taking the time this evening. And also, I just love you, Miss Sally. I love working with you. I'll just hand it over for you for closing.
Thank you so much. You've said everything. Thank you, guys, for seriously giving up an hour of your lives. It means so much to us that you're invested in this for our children too. So thank you. Thank you, Nikki.
Yeah, take care, everyone. And we look forward to seeing you in a fortnight for the next session.
See you soon.
Bye.